Okay, welcome to Old College Try, the podcast, all things college, financial aid, affordability specifically. Open grab bag today, as we always do towards the end of the month, just taking your questions, right? Send these into Instagram, right into support at College Aid Pro. We're always staring at these and we got some great questions this week and this month, as we always do, and we hit them today. Thanks for joining. Okie dokie, Peggy. We got the band back together. Good to see you.
Yep.
Out here in the desert.
For taking the reins last week.
I was in good hands. Mike made my job quite easy. And so last week we had Mike Hunsberger, who's a teammate of ours, on the podcast. That is a former kind of career-long veteran that got into when he went to go put his kids through college. Was like, oh my goodness, this is what an undertaking this is, right? And that, well, I don't know if you know this, Peg. I found out live on the podcast. He's like, that's why I was like, okay, I got to get into kind of financial planning, and I got to help other people do this. Like that's his origin.
That's so funny because that's what I did. You know, a lot of people, it's like when they realize through their kids. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, hey, I'm like a pretty astute guy. I'm comfortable in finances. I know a lot about this GI Bill, and I am like completely overwhelmed. So what chance do the masks have? So yeah, anyways, if you are somebody that has any access to GI benefits or has any questions around loans, we're going to talk more loans today as well. But that was a great episode last week where we were pretty laser focused on specifically the new changes that are relevant with loans. And again, Mike did a good job coaching us up on best practices around GI Bill stuff. As well. So, Peggy, before we dig in, we couldn't remember who was up for a tune this week, but you were ready to go. So let's give you the floor. And
this is kind of it was just a super fun song. It was funny when I was driving with my daughter cross country for her senior year at JMU, because she needed a car to do part of her program to finish out, and she made this playlist and this song was on there, and we're driving like, play it again. And she was like, can't believe you like this song, Mom. And it's gone crazy, like at their weddings. Like when my niece got married, I texted her the morning of, and she was like, oh wait, Peggy's probably texting me to say have a great day. And I'm like, make sure this song's on the playlist, and then Brennan, when he just got married, when that song played, I just grabbed him. And same thing with Shannon. I've already told her this has to be on the playlist. So it's a Sam Hunt song, so country, and it's probably his most popular song, House Party. So you know that song, right?
Oh yeah, that's a fun one.
So it's just kind of turned into my song in the family. So I just figured, if you don't know House Party, it's just a super fun.
It's part of the Keogh tradition now, it sounds like, right?
Yes, it is. It will be a part of everybody's wedding on my side if I have any part of it.
All right. Well, go crank it, people. Get the house party going there. Speaking of house party, Peg, let's dig into some loans and financial aid talk. We know how to have a good time here. So this one pretty specific, right? For somebody that maybe is a teacher thinking about becoming a teacher, kind of regardless of where you are, kind of on that journey. Are there any loans, best practices specifically for students that want to go become a teacher eventually?
Yeah. And just for everybody, if you're coming the first time, the last podcast of the month, we always do a Q&A grab bag. So that's where we're getting these questions from. So shoot them to us. Send them to us at support@collegeaidpro.com. If you're on social, send it in there and it'll get on our list. I have a spreadsheet. So just FYI, that's what we're doing today. So these are your questions that we're answering. So kind of the best, if your child is thinking of being a teacher, there is loan forgiveness for certain careers, and teaching is one of them. So not making a blanket recommendation that you shouldn't look at state and private loans. You should look at all of them. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of differences between the different types of loans and reasons to take one versus the other. But it's definitely a place to look on the federal side, because teachers fall in that bucket along with a few other professions where there can be, at least right now, things are constantly changing inside the Beltway right now, but at least right now there are some options for loan forgiveness. So that's definitely a place not to just take it off your plate. You should entertain the federal loans for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would second that. Think that's, again, to your point, it's impossible to tell every single person who wants to go be a teacher take the federal student loan. That's not accurate. But I think for most people, that makes the most sense, again, for the majority of the folks going that route. Now, there is also, you just want to be clear on, sorry, Peggy, if you had cleared this, but you want to be clear on how that forgiveness qualifies. Like the program that I'm most familiar with, in order to get the maximum amount of forgiveness, you have to do some type of teaching in an underserviced area, right? So it could be a very rural area, right? Or sometimes it's a super urban area that, again, is just needs as much help as they can get in education, and they're not necessarily the destination type places, maybe, right? So hence that's why they want to make an incentive, right? So yeah, I've had a few families go through that as an amazing experience, right? They went and lived in these places that they would never normally live, had a meaningful impact on the ground level before they went on to the next part of their career, and got their loans forgiven, or at least a meaningful percentage as a part of
Yeah, that's a good addition. And so really the devil's in the details. So if
right.
this is applicable to you, go read, get stuff in writing of how things work so that you're not going through this and then realize at the end, uh-oh, this isn't even eligible for it. So make sure
Right.
you look into that. Okay. So the next question, we got a bunch of borrowing questions, coincidentally. We are getting into the borrowing time if you have a senior, so I guess it isn't a huge coincidence. Should we borrow with a federal Parent Plus loan or private student loan?
Yeah, maybe the most common question we get around borrowing, certainly it's on the short list, right? And unfortunately, like most of our questions around borrowing, and quite frankly, a lot of this financial aid process and system, it depends, right? Is the shortest, most accurate answer that I can provide. Now, let me unpack that a little bit here, and it's tough not to be too long-winded, so I'll do my best to be concise. But the first recommendation we give is you got to go shop, right? You got to go be a smart consumer, right? So if we're going to get some type of loan, right, just like we would if we were going to refinance our house or the car, whatever, we have to shop for the best rate and repayment terms, right? Now, what makes this world, educational world, a little bit more complex is that it's not just about your rates, right? Yes, go to the private sector, right, and go see what you qualify for with Sally Mae versus College Ave versus, SoFi or whatever. There's not a ton of big players in that private market space. So go see what you qualify for in terms of rates and repayment terms. Usually they're going to be in the same general vicinity, okay? And then go compare that to the Federal Plus loan. So at least we can compare apples to apples from a rate standpoint, but the repayment terms can vary really significantly, okay? Now, one thing to consider, if you take out a Parent Plus loan, only your name is on that loan as parents, right? So if you're saying to your kid, hey, you're going to be responsible for this, or we're going to share in this 50-50, that's fine, but that's a handshake agreement. If they decide to renege on that deal at any point, there's no, it's tough luck, right? You are on that loan as a parent, whereas the private student loan sector, that is more, I think, of what most people think of as a traditional, the loan is in the student's name, the parent is there as a cosigner. So we're kind of equally responsible if somebody decides not to pay this back. And caveat that's important to mention there, though, is that most of the private student loans, they have a cosigner release program. So if you're one of these families that say, hey, look, I'll cosign, but you got to be responsible for this. I got to worry about your two younger siblings behind you. I got to get off of this loan as soon as possible. The student loan sector offers some options, right? Again, if that's important to your family. So that's where you got to think about what's important to your family, right? Is it, should this be a parent loan, a student loan? Is it both? The federal loan has more flexibility in terms of repayment terms and really everything. Okay. Whereas the private student sector, again, I'm oversimplifying here, is more of this is the deal. You better pay us come hell or high water. Right. So we could go on for a whole episode there, Peggy, but anything that I missed you'd want to add?
Not that you missed. I'll just even go a little bit higher level because it wasn't asked, but we always recommend you start with the federal direct student loans that the student automatically gets as long as you submit the FAFSA. So that $5,500 for freshman year. So for a lot of people, that's great, but It's not covering the whole gap. So start there and then go from there. The interest rates are not out yet. They will come out officially. I don't know if they usually announce it like in June, but it's based on the 10-year treasury note, which the auction in May. So
Right.
we'll know it should drop because the Fed has lowered interest rates, but it was on my 8.94%. So as to Matt's point, depends what matters to you. Nobody wants high interest, but you
Sure.
might choose higher interest because there's certain perks to a loan that another loan doesn't have. So as he said, it really depends. It depends what matters to you. And I'll just say, as my little financial planner nerd that I am, also think, do not, when you're making these decisions, do not think of this as a 1 year. Really, when you're making these decisions, you got to think about if I'm doing this much debt, I got to multiply this by 4. And if it's not affordable, maybe look at other options on your child's list if you haven't made that decision. So,
Yeah, again, it's me and Mike had talked about this a little bit last week, where another one of the superpowers of these colleges and kind of the buying process is that you do buy in kind of 1 year chunks, which just almost makes it more digestible, right?
yeah.
Even if it's 100 grand, you don't pause the same way when you just get the 400,000 in front of you, right? So it's like, again, it's another one of the superpowers of just in this process that I think families would look at differently if you had that all at once, right?
You need the 4-year cash flow, and that's something we can help you with
Yeah.
the cap. 100%. I mean, you will sleep better at night. You might not like what you see on some of them, but then you know what you're signing up for. And you might see some really nice ones and say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is going to be a better option for us.
Yeah. So you said it, but just another, additional smaller detail. But the plus loan rate was 8.94% last year. So currently for this school year, odds are that's going to go down a little bit. It's not going to go down a ton, right?
No,
So
it's not going to drop to 6% or anything.
that's the ballpark we're going to be in. I think Save Money probably says somewhere around 8.5. We will see. But they have a origination fee of 4%. It's pretty meaningful. It's not nothing, right? Whereas the just about all private student loans, there is no origination fee. So that's at 0%. So when we say the rate is 8.94%, but we also have an origination fee of 4%, effectively most people are borrowing at 10%, right?
Yeah, it's actually almost 4.25. It's very
Right.
expensive. It's very expensive. So that's
Yeah,
just another piece in your decision making.
exactly.
Thinking about that.
Another variable in there. Okay, let's see. So, okay, timing wise here, Peggy, right? I'm getting ready to borrow for next year. What's my timeline? We're approaching the end of March here, the end of Q1. When do we execute?
You should be starting to look now. We're going to start doing, I think we're doing the first one Sunday, right, Matt? We're starting to do our borrowing webinars. Get on our list, go on our webinars. We will go through all the different types. You need to start getting schooled now and looking at rates and everything. You're not early. And again, in a perfect world, you're doing this 4-year cash flow and you're understanding if that delta each year is going to be loans. You have a feel for, oh, we got approved at College Ave for this amount. We know what the Parent Plus loan is. If there's if you're looking at the state option, you have a good clue of what your interest rates are going to be. So you're making decisions with your eyes wide open. So basically now and ongoing, you're not waiting until the summer before
Right.
your child goes to college. At that point, you're really late.
Yeah. Well, and most of you will, or no, probably not our listeners, Peg, but most of the
Makes it
masses.
more stressful, so it's better to
Most colleges, and again, of course, there's colleges issue their bills for the fall semester in and around July 1st, due in and around August 1st, right? Certainly there's some that are earlier, some that are later. I know, Peg, like your kids had like a significant,
different.
they were on like either end of the spectrum, if
Yeah.
memory serves me, right?
Yep. Yep.
But that is, yeah, and so certainly, your drop dead dates are going to be somewhere, so to speak, before you start getting penalties and aren't able to register for classes, are for most of you going to be between early and mid-August, right?
Yeah, and
Uh,
just realize with the federal direct loans, you don't go shopping, you don't do any of this stuff. You just submit that FAFSA, and the
yeah,
college should put that on your child's financial aid award letter. If they don't, you can call them, even if you're not eligible for the subsidized version, call them up and say, hey, I want the unsubsidized version. please put it on there, and then they'll do it. Some schools call themselves no loan schools, so they give you grants, but you can always get the unsubsidized loan if you've got a gap there and you need to fill it. So just that one is pretty easy peasy. You don't have to do much except submit the FAFSA.
Yep, exactly. Peggy, I think you're stumping me now.
All right. Where can I find my student aid index slash, we call it an SAI?
Yeah. So, right, this is and just by, for those of you that listen every week, this is day one stuff. But for those of you just tuning in now, SAI, that acronym, Peggy just said it, Student Aid Index. This is a dollar amount that gets assigned to the student, largely based on your family's financial situation, right? Income and non-retirement assets. There's some other variables in there, but those are the big drivers. Okay. And based on the answers to those questions, this dollar amount gets assigned to the student slash family as kind of your foundation to determine your financial aid eligibility. Okay. Now, every school can have different variations about how they calculate the SAI. There's a spectrum, but there's two broad buckets. There is the federal SAI, and this is determined by the Department of Education, and it's the end result of completing a FAFSA, right? So we have to complete this free application for federal student aid each year. Again, we put our income, our assets, some other family variables in there. And boom, we're going to be assigned a student aid index according to the Department of Education. That gets sent off to each of the schools that require it. Now, where I'm going to send you guys before we get to the FAFSA, I'm going to send you to our platform, right? mycap.collegeaidpro.com. The big difference with us and say just the federal SAI, there's two SAIs. I said it, right? In addition to the federal SAI, there's the institutional SAI. This is the end result after you submit your CSS profile, this financial aid application that about 200 colleges across the country require, but they tend to be a lot of the, our biggest name brand schools, all the Ivies, the University of Michigan, USC, these types of schools. That is the SAI that matters. Now, unlike the FAFSA, when you submit the CSS profile or you submit UChicago or Princeton's own application, you don't get to see where your SAI is there. We show you that. So that's really, really important to know that, yes, I don't just know my federal SAI ahead of time, but I also know my institutional SAI ahead of time. So that's where we would go to send you. And by the way, these two formulas that are in our platform, we don't reverse engineer to take a best guess as what they are. We get the tables from the Department of Education. That's public. Anybody can get those. We get the tables from the College Board, right? So again, these are the actual formulas, right? To a T, right? Right down to the smallest detail that each of these two different ways of aid eligibility are calculated. What do you think, Peggy?
Yeah. Yeah. And if we've got younger parents on here, do it now. Even if you have a freshman, start understanding your SAIs. It's just the foundation of this whole thing. And you'll be much more in the driver's seat. If you can set up a free account. If you decide you want to put in unlimited schools, it's $4.99 a month. It's a no-brainer in the mix of all of this. And as Matt said, we give you the two estimates and you can see how it plays out for you for different schools. So I know you've had this too, Matt, where you meet a family for the first time, it's senior year, and I mention SAI and they say, what are you talking about? Right. And so with that, that family, those parents, they miss the boat on so many planning opportunities, and hopefully they're in a good affordability space, but maybe not. And then the colleges are just completely in the driver's seat if you don't understand how this whole thing works. And that's why we exist, to to be an advocate for you and bring the transparency in a very not transparent industry, basically.
No. All right, Peggy, these next two ones are more of statements than they are questions, but I think there's some at least insinuated questions in here. I think I'll have you hit both of them and I can kind of layer on with anything if I think I can provide any additional value there. But okay, so question slash statement. We're in the middle class, so we can't get aid, but we also cannot afford to pay. So our kids make up most of the population. They're also the ones who will be in debt into their 40s unless they forego college altogether. So more of a statement in there. What would your response be to that statement slash kind of question?
My response would be planning, planning, planning. That is not necessarily true. Kind of what we were just saying about the SAIs. Start understanding how this works. Go on our free webinars. We We teach you all this stuff over and over again. One, you're saying you can't get aid. Don't be offended, but I don't really know if I believe you because you might be wrong, right? It would be a nice thing to be wrong about. A lot of people think they can't get any aid, and they absolutely can because
Mhm.
they talk to their neighbor or their sister or whomever. So the first thing is figure out what your SAIs are and then start looking at different schools. Matt and I say all the time, all these schools have what we call business plans. They all discount their costs. So if you're looking at a school and saying, cost $70,000. I can't afford that. Well, welcome to the world. Most people can't afford that times 4. So over a quarter of $1,000,000. I was on a panel in Portland a couple weeks ago. I had the president of the University of Portland sitting next to me. I said it. He reiterated it. He said cost of attendance sticker price is irrelevant. So you need to understand that you've got to do some planning and get help. Get help from us. If it's completely overwhelming, it's understandable. Seek the help, start the free webinars to understand it. I'm not saying that we can make it all perfect so you don't have to pay anything. That's rare. But start planning so maybe you can afford to put a little money aside, or maybe it's a start here and transfer to this school. There's a lot of different options out there, but just waiting until your child's almost a senior, picking schools that you've heard of that you like for whatever reason, and just kind of going, okay, let's apply and see what happens. That's a recipe for disaster. And I'm not catastrophizing. It
No.
just literally is.
Yeah, that's it, right? We'll figure it out as the again, another college superpower of like somehow that's in the ether here for those of us American college bound consumers. The other thing that I would add to that is like, look at borrowing's not necessarily a bad thing, right? This is a major investment in which there are plenty of ways in which we can get a great return on that investment. That's where we want to have guardrails, though. How much is too much to borrow? Again, our favorite answer. It depends. What college are we going to? What is the intended major and career path? That should dictate, right? We started talking about teachers, right? The amount we would have somebody that wants to go be an elementary school teacher borrow would be a smaller dollar amount than somebody that's going to major in computer science, right? It's just, we have different, obviously, earning power. Okay. So
We got to change that major back because now computer science majors can't get a job.
it's funny, as it was coming out of my mouth, I'm like, nah, this is probably not a good comp, but you know what? I'm just, whatever, just habit, I guess. Right. So hopefully the point came across that
Yeah.
all majors and career paths are not created equal. And that should be a part of our calculus in this decision. Again, we're being extra kind of self-serving and pointing people towards the platform for today, but that's genuinely, but it's right there. We do the math for you, right? We crunch that for you. Okay. If my kid's going to get into business management, how much should I be comfortable borrowing if it's school X versus school Y with this, again, intended major here, right? So
Yeah, and if you think about it, you go, I mean, not everybody, but most people, you're going to buy a car, you're going to move somewhere and buy a house. You do some research. The bank gives you a limit. Usually it's insanely high from what I would want to spend, but they don't let you go out of control. And when people buy cars, they don't go to the Maserati lot because they know I can't afford this. You got to try and think about college as you're a consumer, you're making a purchase, not you're kind of at the mercy of this system. And what do I do? I'm middle class, we're screwed. Flip it around and say, you know what, we're going to be in the driver's seat and we're going to make this work because we help people all the time that can get decent outcomes with, to your point, Matt, reasonable
right,
amount of debt. College is still worth it. That's what the panel was about that I'm on. The
that's right.
stats show it. But if you're going to go graduate with 300,000 in debt, no, that was a bad move. You
Right.
should go to trade school or don't go. I mean, you just got to you got to plan. You
That's
just
right.
have to.
Okay, so your last kind of statement, I'll bounce off you here, Peggy, and you can respond to it. But financial aid and admissions are connected. Okay, and then the one example in here is if you're a student that a school needs to round out their class, the schools may offer a kid more money than kind of the I don't know, I guess general formula would call for. But just talk to us in your words, kind of how the financial and admissions piece are intertwined.
Yeah. So, and parents ask this question all the time about, should I even say I want financial aid? Am I going to get in? And they are intertwined at a lot of schools. I'll just introduce a few terms that you might have seen. I mean, there's schools that will say they're need blind, which means they don't care if you literally are going to need a full ride to be able to get in, or you can write a full check. That's not the lion's share of schools. And if you're a little jaded, you could say, all right, they can say they're need blind, but they know your zip code. They know things about you, right? If you have a Beverly Hills zip code, they might be thinking, yeah, okay, you're probably not a pauper, right? So then there's need aware. And that means, as the name kind of says, they pay attention. But it's not, I mean, I've talked to some people at colleges. What they say is, look, they want students that are going to be an asset on their campus and honestly great alums that might contribute and do great things in the world. And so all these colleges, like I said earlier, are discounting the cost. So they're ready to do that for the right students in different ways. So you just want to keep that in mind, understand the business plan, but they are linked. And I will do a plug for our pod. We're going to be doing a podcast in a couple weeks. I'm going to record it next week. And I'm going to be talking to a woman who's been at the college side, and then she also became a school counselor. And that's what we're going to dig into. Like the statement that Matt read after the first thing about financial aid admissions being linked, absolutely true. And that's where, even though Matt and I get up every day to make this more transparent for you, we can't go into these colleges and know. The provost came in and said, we need more females that are this ethnic group that have great math SAT scores. Whatever it happens to be, there's different priorities that the colleges have, and you're not privy to it. We're not privy to it. And that's where it's linked as well. Financial aid can be linked to that as well. When they have their methodologies, like Matt said, but ultimately, when they're putting together financial aid packages, it's their money. So they have discretion to do what they want with it. So we see this where, one child will get a certain package and another student gets a different one. And so we can't make this process 100% transparent. So what I always tell people, because their heads kind of spin, well, okay, what can we do about this? Cast a wide net. Understand how the colleges function. I don't mean apply to 30 or 40 schools. I'm not an admissions person here, but cast a wide net. Don't just focus on 3 schools and hope for the best, because you are going to get most likely different award packages, and then you can go from there.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot here with this one, right? Because two things came up for me. I mean, one is just we get a lot of I don't want to say conspiracy theorists. That's not the right term, but just people that are just like, I don't believe that colleges are actually need blind. I just think they're businesses, and if I say that I'm applying for financial aid, that is going to negatively impact my kids, getting into that college. Now, look, you said it, Peggy. Like, we don't know. We don't actually know if that's true or not. I will say, just this is more anecdotal. I don't have any reason to believe that these colleges are lying. We don't have any data or whistleblowers that we've seen that prove that wasn't true. I will say, right, we talk about these guys. We've had them on the podcast, right? Ryan Callahan, who's in financial aid at Harvard, Josh DeMayo, who's in financial aid at MIT. These are need blind colleges, right? They're both in the grad school level, but they have a keen awareness of what goes on at undergrad, right? They're on that side of the desk. They would tell us if they play games there, right? We talk about these things offline, right? They give us a lot of inside baseball stuff. We ask that question, to them probably once or a couple of times a year, and they're like, yeah, we are completely above board here. And again, we have the types of relationship with these individuals that would tell us if that wasn't the case, right? So anyways, those are 2 schools where, as far as we know, we do have that inside perspective, and they walk the walk.
Yeah, and they have tons of money, right? They're sitting on most of the schools that say they're need blind. They're sitting on really nice endowments, right?
Right.
So they have the money for the kids to give them before. And the Harvards of the world say, if you make this, you get free tuition with reasonable assets. So if you're somebody who's sitting on a lot of assets, but you're retired, planting that seed, that you need to look a little deeper. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's some great deals out there. To the other person's question about being middle class, which what does that even mean
Sure.
now? What is middle class? Different people would define it differently. But yeah, it's just eh, they're the other thing, not to get, I'll just say it, and that's another podcast, but the whole thing is they're need blind, but what's your need? How are
Right.
they calculating your need? And that's a whole nother conversation. You might think it's a full need and they don't for a certain reason. So that's the other piece of the puzzle too.
Don't forget, if we don't apply for financial aid freshman year, we're telling that college we're paying full rack rate or whatever you give us for all 4 years. We don't get to change our mind in
Yeah,
subsequent
most
years.
most schools are not, yeah.
Most schools won't let you do it, and so we have to err on that side. The ones that might change their mind, those are the exceptions. So we have to assume that this is a deal if we don't apply for freshman year. The only other thing that I'll just
Honestly, if you need financial aid, just apply and don't even think about it. Like, just apply, and if it's gonna be a problem with the school, that's not the school for your child. It just
I'm gl-
isn't, and let it go. Don't let your kids get emotionally tied to schools, and you don't get emotionally tied. I'm saying
I'm
that as a parent, not as a professional. Just it's not a winning game to do that.
I'm glad you said that because we know we have this conversation so many times every single year, right, Peggy? And it's about to start again as we get into the next admissions cycle over the spring and summer here. And it stinks, right? Because a lot of these parents, they feel like all the shame and guilt of like, oh my God, my kids worked their butt off and I didn't save enough money, or we don't make enough money to be able to afford the types of schools they want to go to. And what if I say that we're applying for financial aid and I'm the one that hurt their chances of getting in, right? I know for a fact that just too many parents are losing sleep over that, right? Now, first of all, that just sucks. Like, what a shitty part about our system, right? But the other thing that I say, to your point, Peggy, is I say, look, if you didn't get financial aid to the school, this $100,000, $105,000 school, could you pay for it? If the answer is no, then there's nothing to think about. Why are we torturing
Exactly.
ourselves, right? We have to do it. Freaking send it in, get it done, and there's no sense in over rotating. If you want to over rotate, you got to be in a position to be like, yeah, yes, we could do this $105,000. Okay, well then you think about whether or not you think it's going to impact them getting in, and you can swallow whatever the full rack rate would be, right? But if you
Kudos
know,
to you if you could afford 105 times 4 with inflation. You're pushing half a mil. Then there's a discussion of, is it worth it? And I will say, I don't think any school in this world is worth that amount of money, rack rate. I just don't. It's for the future of your child, hands down, no, including my alma mater. No. But that's
Cornell,
just
by the way,
my
Cornell. For those of you listening, that would be Cornell.
that's just my opinion. It's not Matt's, but
No,
it's
it's not
not
Matt.
Pat's, it's mine.
Well, you know what? It's funny. Usually we get into our normal banter here where I'm like, that's not true, Peggy. Some of these schools are a golden ticket or whatever, in my opinion, obviously. But geez, I don't, because you say $500,000 out loud, and I don't
Yes.
know. Yeah. And again, and especially if you're the type of kid that can get into those types of schools for $500,000, you could get into other great schools for a fraction of that, and then go put that other 250 or 300 or whatever to work elsewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is getting harder and harder for me to defend that stance if I can at all. I don't know. So I'm going to reserve the right.
It's what you do you can go to Harvard and be a bump on a log and graduate and go nowhere. And you can go to Iowa State and kill it and leverage everything there and be a CEO, hands down. There's books written about this.
JP Schmidt,
Harvard,
baby, like our
Harvard,
very own
Columbia,
JP Schmidt.
more.
Look at
I
the
was thinking
career
of
that he's.
it with March Madness. I should have texted him. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Peggy, that's all I got here. Anything you want to add as we close off?
Should I add the last little piece here, or is that gonna be confusing? Maybe I'm gonna add it, but just
Or
before we go, I don't want people's heads to spin that have younger kids, but just for people that if you're in college and you haven't taken any loans, the big beautiful OBBB act, the OBBB that was passed. After they pass an act, then they do what's called negotiating rulemaking, and they go and entities get in there and they basically interpret it so that it can be meaningful, because the act by itself isn't usually, it can't be implemented. So one thing that came out of that, which is huge, is the Parent Plus loan that we were talking about earlier. There are caps on it of $20,000 a year for any borrower that starts borrowing post July 1 of this year. but people can be grandfathered if you've already borrowed either Parent Plus loans or your child has borrowed federal direct student loans. You are grandfathered for 3 years or the rest of the time. If your child's a sophomore, they have 2 more years of college. You're grandfathered into the old system, which I'm not in love with, but you can borrow unlimited from the cost of attendance minus any aid that the college is giving you. And that's how a lot of people fill the gap. The new law is saying, nope, 20,000 a year, 65,000 cap. But if you're in the middle of a funding strategy, just keep that in mind that you will be grandfathered. If you've taken out parent loans, you're covered. But if you've taken out parent loans, I really hope you've done the federal direct student loans before that. But if you've only done federal direct and for senior year, you're going to need some parent loans, you will be grandfathered if you need to go over 20, say for your child's senior year in college. So that hasn't been like blasted in the media at all. So it's an interesting that, we as professionals at CAP said, hey, that's not how we interpreted it because there was no reason to do that. And then it came out of negotiated rulemaking. So
Yeah, a little tidbit that can be really impactful for people that are somewhere in this bucket of needing to maximize the plus loan, certainly. So good call, Peggy. Hopefully that's helping out somebody out there. But thank you as always, and we will see you soon.
Yeah. See you next time, everybody.
Okay. Thanks for listening to Old College Try, the podcast. Please like us. Please follow us. Please share us. Today I was it was the old band back together, myself, Matt Carpenter, and Peggy Keogh. And this episode has been produced and edited by our very own Eileen Campbell. Thank you.